He was described as the unkillable soldier. His very flesh bore the testimony of battle. For over 5 decades and 2 world wars, Sir Adrian Carton de Wiart lost an eye, a hand, was shot through the head and stomach, survived plane crashes, escaped prison camps, and he always returned to the fray. Born in Brussels in 1880 to a wealthy aristocratic family, Adrian was raised with all the privileges of a trans-European elite. Yet in 1891, Carton de Wiart was sent by his English stepmother to the Roman Catholic oratory school in England, an elite boarding institution. Afterward, he enrolled at Balliol College, Oxford, but his academic career was short-lived. As the Second Boer War broke out around 1899, he abandoned university life and enlisted in the British Army. Concealing his identity and his true age, he signed up under the name Trooper Carton and claimed to be 25, determined to see combat firsthand. Adrian's bravery was immediate and reckless. He was wounded in the stomach and groin early in the campaign, his first of many brushes with death. But rather than discourage him, the experience confirmed what would be his lifelong passion: war, danger, and the thrill of personal courage. After convalescing in England, he returned to Oxford briefly, but abandoned it again for good, committing himself fully to a military life. The years that followed took him to India and then to British Somaliland in 1914, where he participated in a punitive expedition against the dervish leader Muhammad Abdul Hassan, also known as the Mad Mullah. During an assault on an enemy fort at Shimberberis, he was struck twice in the face by gunfire, resulting in the loss of his left eye and part of his ear. Bandaged and bleeding, he refused evacuation until the battle was done. He would wear a black eye patch for the rest of his life, becoming instantly recognizable by it. The Somali campaign would earn him his first Distinguished Service Order, but more than that, it solidified his reputation as a fearless and tenacious leader. With the outbreak of the First World War, Carton de Wiart was sent to the Western Front with the Royal Dragoon Guards, before transferring to command roles in the trenches. It was here, amid the mud and misery of France and Flanders, that his almost supernatural resilience was tested again and again. He participated in some of the most brutal battles of the war. In 4 years, he was wounded no more than 8 times. He was shot through the skull and ankle at the Battle of the Somme, took a bullet to the hip at Passchendaele, and was wounded in the leg at Cambrai, and struck to the ear at Arras. His hand was shattered by grenade shrapnel, and when a doctor hesitated to amputate 2 mangled fingers, Adrian famously tore them off himself. The rest of his hand was soon amputated. He would later quip that he found it all rather amusing. When he was shot in the head, ankle, leg, hip, and ear, he returned to the front after every injury. By 1916, he had already lost an eye and a hand, yet he was promoted to brigadier and given command of the 12th Brigade. At the Battle of the Somme and then Passchendaele, he was a fixture on the front lines. He led with a kind of aristocratic defiance, utterly unconcerned by the danger around him. A contemporary wrote that he moved about the battlefield with the coolness and deliberation of a man engaged in a game of golf. Soldiers under his command would later speak of him with a mix of awe and incredulity. Death just seemed to glance off him. In July 1916, during the Battle of the Somme near La Boiselle, Adrian, then a temporary lieutenant colonel, displayed exceptional bravery that earned him the Victoria Cross. Already severely wounded in earlier battles, he led repeated assaults under heavy fire, personally rallying his men and pressing the attack. Over several days, he exposed himself to relentless danger, and even after being wounded in the head, refused to withdraw until the position was secure. His fearless leadership and refusal to yield were instrumental in the operation's success and deeply inspired those under his command. By the war's end, he'd been wounded to the point of partial deafness, facial disfigurement, and permanent disability. But to him, it was merely a matter of service. In his memoir, Happy Odyssey, he famously wrote the words, "Frankly, I enjoy the war." It's a thrilling read, and if you'd like to explore it yourself, you find a link in the description. After the end of World War I, he was assigned to Poland as head of the British military mission during the Polish-Soviet War, tasked with supporting the newly re-established Polish state. Even after the mission officially ended, he chose to remain in Poland, settling on a country estate in the east. For the next 15 years, he lived a relatively peaceful life, hunting, riding, and socializing with the Polish elite, while maintaining informal ties to British diplomatic and military networks. Yet war came again, and with it, the call to duty. In the tense final days before the German invasion of Poland in 1939, Adrian met with the Polish commander-in-chief. He quickly formed a dim view of the Marshal's strategic judgment and urged a major repositioning of Polish forces east of the Vistula River to strengthen their defences. His warning went unheeded. One piece of advice, however, was eventually taken, after much resistance. Adrian had strongly recommended that Poland's modern naval vessels be sent out of the Baltic before they could be trapped or destroyed. That plan was finally accepted, and the escape of several destroyers and submarines later proved valuable to the Allied war effort at sea. As the German blitzkrieg swept across the country and the Soviet Union invaded from the east, Polish resistance rapidly crumbled. Amid the chaos, Adrian took charge of evacuating the British military mission from Warsaw, along with members of the Polish government. It was a perilous retreat. On the road out of the capital, their convoy came under a heavy attack by the Luftwaffe, and one of his aides' wives was killed in the bombardment. Reaching Romania offered little relief, as German influence there posed the risk of internment or arrest. Using a false passport and considerable nerve, Adrian managed to escape by air on 21st of September, just hours before Romania's pro-Allied Prime Minister Armand Călinescu was assassinated by fascist sympathizers. It was yet another narrow escape in a life defined by danger, quick decisions, and unshakable resolve. Adrian was in his late 50s, an age when most generals were either behind desks or retirement, especially when they had as many injuries as he had. But not him. He re-entered service, this time as the head of the British military mission to Norway during the disastrous Norwegian campaign in 1940. The mission failed, but Adrian's personal heroics were undiminished. In 1941, fate played another cruel joke. While en route to a new assignment in Yugoslavia, his aircraft crashed in the Mediterranean. He and the crew had to swim to shore. Adrian survived again, only to be taken prisoner by the Italians. He was interned at a POW camp near Florence, and while most prisoners might have accepted captivity at his age, Adrian plotted escape repeatedly. Adrian made 5 escape attempts during his time as a prisoner of war in Italy, including one that involved 7 months of patient tunneling beneath the camp. In perhaps his boldest effort, he slipped away disguised as an Italian peasant. Despite being 62 years old, unable to speak the language, and unmistakably conspicuous with his eye patch and empty sleeve, and a battle-scarred face, he evaded capture for 8 days while wandering the northern countryside before being recaptured. In 1943, following Italy's surrender, Adrian was released under a flag of truce and tasked with helping to negotiate the terms of the Italian armistice on behalf of the British Empire. One might imagine that even the most stubborn soldier would consider retirement after such an ordeal, but Adrian had one final mission. In 1943, Churchill appointed him as his personal representative in China. He served in this position until the end of the war in 1945, acting as a liaison and observer in a region beset by civil war, Japanese occupation, and rising communist influence. He met with Mao Zedong and witnessed the fragile, volatile power structures of the Far East. It was during this time that he finally began to consider leaving military life behind. When the war ended, he retired from the army with the rank of Lieutenant General. But even in retirement, his brushes with death did not end. While returning home through French Indochina, Adrian made a stop at Rangoon as a guest of the local army commander. As he descended the stairs, he slipped on a piece of coconut matting, took a hard fall, and was knocked unconscious, having fractured several vertebrae in the process. He was taken to Rangoon Hospital, where he received treatment for his injuries. Adrian Carton de Wiart retired to a quiet life in Cork, Ireland, where he died at the age of 83 in 1963.